Hello and welcome to It's About Youth with me, Faye Kwan. From the future of jobs to the energy transition and now all under the age of AI, young people are not just affected by these changes, they are central to them. However, a key question still remains. Are young people and young Malaysians truly being included in shaping the decisions that will affect their future? Today, I speak with two young leaders about that. Joining me on the show are Umar Khaleed, President of the ASEAN Youth Science and Economic Forum, also known as AYSEF 2025, and Nadia Khadijah, Vice President of AYSEF 2025. Both of you, thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem. Thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Now, firstly, a little bit of background for the audience about AYSEF. It started out as a STEM initiative, so science, tech, engineering, and maths, a STEM-focused initiative that has since grown into more of a national platform that's including both Malaysian candidates and also people across ASEAN. Firstly, Umar, what sort of gaps do you think there is in Malaysia's youth ecosystem that made such a platform necessary in the first place?
Thank you for that question, Faye. I think in AYSEF, first of all, our mission is to promote interdisciplinary thinking across Malaysian youth. I think in an age where AI is rapidly advancing, we believe young people should first build their interdisciplinary perspectives before specializing in their desired majors. And this is because Malaysia's youth ecosystem has developed in separate tracks and silos. Young people often engage in STEM, economics, policy, or social issues in isolation. While many are technically strong, there have been few spaces that bring these areas together or show how real national and regional decisions are made. I mean, not to mention our traditional approaches to how I think coming from government schools especially, there has been a stigma in the sense where if you achieve like a very good results in your Form 3s, you should be going for STEM instead, and humanities is like, well, the leftovers. And because I come from a humanities background, but I think that is not really the case nowadays. I think it's more of an interest. At the same time, I think AYSF was also built to bridge the youth ecosystem gap where the access to industry leaders, mentorship, and meaningful networks is often concentrated among a small group of youth, especially those in the right circle or come from the privileged backgrounds. And yes, that combination of fragmentation and unequal access is what made a platform like AYSEF necessary.
I mean, it's interesting how you point out, right, that gap and the sort of silos of science stream versus art stream. Interdisciplinary is really the key word here, and I'd like to delve a little bit more into that. But firstly, Nadia, what do you think? In your opinion, what do you personally feel is missing in how young Malaysians are being prepared for the future economy?
I think I just want to touch on what Umar mentioned just now. Interdisciplinary thinking was really the driver and the backbone of what AYSEF was meant to be for the youth of Malaysians and for ASEAN people in general. So I think, touching on Malaysia's education system, it's very much siloed in the sense where we have students going in the science stream that's often seen as more prestigious, and then those students in the art stream are seen as undervalued. And so we wanted to break that barrier and that perception between these two students and these two categories, for example. So, this also is reflected in broader issues in Malaysia, in the sense where, while we were doing research about AYSEF and just checking out the STEM education and financial literacy situation in our country, we realized that many students and parents in Malaysia still have low awareness and motivation about careers and opportunities in the STEM field. And so we wanted to change this narrative. And as well as that, we also realized that financial literacy remains a major problem in our country. Like despite policies and initiatives being implemented, many young Malaysians still struggle with basic concepts like investing, responsible debt, and like long-term financial planning. So at AYSEF, we wanted to include economics, so broaden our scope to include economics so that we could tackle and address these issues, and also to provide a platform where young people can understand the future economy more holistically rather than through fragmented disciplines.
That's really interesting when you talk about that at shifting these narratives and also raising awareness about these topics, it really comes from giving youth access to spaces such as AYSEF, platforms such as this, and amplifying their voices. And when we talk about youth empowerment, I think many young Malaysians really express a lot of dissatisfaction and talking about how they're locked out of these spaces, they're locked out of decision making. Umar, in your view, what does real empowerment here really look like, and how do we move beyond from slogans to real access?
I personally think that real youth empowerment isn't just about giving them a voice or just for the sake of ticking a box of, yes, I've consulted a youth for this and things like that. I think it's beyond that, and especially it's also about giving them the proper knowledge, exposure and experience for them to actually contribute something meaningful. Not just something that, empowering them by including them to give a talk and things like that, but their ideas are not really delved into the real decision making of the policy making in the country. And being a youth shouldn't be a ticket to influence, but it should never be the reason that young people are locked out of meaningful opportunities or have their ideas not accepted or discredited just because of their age. And I think to move from slogans to real access, the key is to open up networks, mentorships, and decision-making space. We want to give them not just a voice, but rather the knowledge to say the right thing to actually help the country in terms of decision-making. Because we do agree that Malaysian youth needs the space to actually speak, but we want to make sure that they speak the right and something that is knowledgeable. And platforms like AYSEF create those bridges where youth don't just participate, but they contribute and co-create alongside leaders, because empowerment only begins when people are knowledgeable enough to actually say the things that are helpful, not just saying something so that it's just an opinion.
Understanding it's just not about representation anymore, right? Having youth at the table is not enough. Guiding them to make these informed decisions and amplifying their voices from a different perspective is the more important part here. So when it comes to AYSEF and including economics now, the economy, and all things, topics such as data, capital, and energy, do you think decisions around these issues are being made with enough youth input, or is there something that's still missing from the conversation? Nadia?
I think youth input is becoming more increasingly considered. However, I do think that youth input should be made more earlier in the decision-making process. So I think that's what is lacking currently in our country. Personally, for me, I think that youth is normally our opinions are normally taken into consideration during the outreach stage, not usually during the policy formulation stage. And I think that's where it all starts. It all starts with the beginning of, when you're making a policy, it all starts from the very beginning. And so because of that, I think it limits the depth of youth influence in solving those topics that you mentioned just now, from data governance to capital allocation and even energy transition. So, that is really important, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's going to be our generation that's going to be bearing the consequences of these policies and these issues if not implemented correctly. So I do believe that the one thing that is missing is co-creation between senior policymakers and the youth of today in shaping the country and shaping more progressive policies for Malaysia. And also, we should steer the conversation, we should move the conversation more away from just youth representation, but towards capacity building. So that means, not just seeing youth representation as something symbolic, but something that's credible and well-informed.
Umar, I see you nodding your head a lot to what Nadia
I
saying.
really agree with Nadia in the sense where youth, in terms of just the inputs needed for the future itself, especially when it involves future industries, because youth shouldn't just be the observers of change, but they should be the ones driving it. And what's important is that we want them to be able to drive impactful change. And that only happens if they're knowledgeable enough. And I do understand that institutions wouldn't really want to, adhere to certain opinions because they're just youth opinions. But if we are the one who's going to be driving these industries and we are going to be the one benefiting from it, I think we do deserve a seat at the table, but it shouldn't just be because we're youth, but we're credible youth.
And as Nadia said, your generation is the one that's really there to bear the consequences, if not already bearing the consequences of decisions around these issues. Nadia, you also talked a little bit earlier about the lack of co-creation. That's interesting when you say that, because especially when it comes to artificial intelligence, AI, I think there's a lot of anxiety around the future of AI, how it's, quote unquote, replacing jobs. But young people, however, have grown up in a digital age where they are constantly adapting to new technologies, and they may not see things, or they may see things a little bit differently compared to policymakers. Do you think there's a disconnect then in also how you view AI and how it's being governed?
That's a very good question. I think there is somewhat of a disconnect, but if we think about Malaysia as a whole and comparative to other nations, I think we're doing quite a good job at navigating through it more thoughtfully than other countries, for example. So I'll get into that more later. But personally for me, I think that the youth of today see AI less as a fear and more as a tool. And personally speaking, I use AI every single day of my life, and it's very helpful for me as I use it in my learning, in school, when it comes to learning new things or problem solving, or even drafting emails or proposals and stuff like that. So yes, AI has its benefits, but at the same time, it has its downsides too. But with that, I really do believe that the power of education and awareness is hopefully sufficient enough to teach young people and young Malaysians that to teach them to be able to distinguish between the differences of the risks and the potentials of AI. But as I mentioned, there are risks that come with AI, and that's where governance is key. So I think on the policy side and in terms of Malaysia, I think we're taking quite a balanced approach on AI, because AI is actually not banned in schools. In fact, the Ministry of Education is integrating AI into the education system, which I think is a very good thing, because it shows that our government has trust in the youth of today, the youth to make sure that we use AI in a proper manner. And I think that's really good, but then at the same time, regulation also matters, because without a doubt, you're going to have people that are going to be misusing AI. Like take, for example, the recent news that came out about Grok. So Malaysia is one of 2 countries in the world to have banned Grok, for example, and I think that shows a very principled and protective stance that we have taken as a nation to protect the people in our country, and especially safeguarding the interests of women and children in Malaysia, which is something that is really important as AI continues to evolve and develop, because we never know what it's going to be like in the future. So I think all in all, governance is equally important in regulating and managing how AI is used in our country.
Right, thank you for that, Nadia. I think you really hit a spot there when you talk about not just fearing AI, but learning to adapt with it. If not, we fall behind. But being aware of the risks, how to use it effectively, it can be a very beneficial tool, especially for youths for today. But you mentioned Grok, and that's just one example of how AI or digitalization is advancing so rapidly, sometimes beyond our control. I'm curious to know from the both of you, what sort of skills or mindsets do you think young Malaysians need today to kind of actively participate in shaping economic and policy decisions of tomorrow? Umar?
Maybe I'll take that.
Yeah.
So I think, first of all, I think number one for Malaysian youth, the skills that we actually need for the future is actually number one, to always be curious, to always question assumptions, and examine the things that you read online, and explore further than just what you're comfortable with, and explore technology more than just surface or just user level. And I think that's very important, because the curiosity that we have builds innovation and the drive for us to explore things that we have never even explored. And number 2 is to have that interdisciplinary thinking as well as being agile. You have to be able to explore things that are not in your specialization. I mean, there's an English saying that jacks of all trades is a master of none, but then I think being a jack of all trades and a master in some areas, I think that actually helps, because right now, as AI advances, there's no way humans can actually keep up with the pace of how AI is growing in terms of content and speed. But what makes us different and what makes us very valuable is the fact of how we exercise our judgment and use that human judgment is very, very important. And number 3 is also being adaptable, as we have to be able to continue to keep reskilling because jobs will change and the economy will always need a certain set of skills. I mean, before this, we needed maybe some a website creator, but now Claude AI can just replace that. And before this, maybe a clerk's job can now be simplified by using ChatGPT to draft emails and things like that. So the act of continued reskilling is very, very important for Malaysian youth to stay relevant in today's economy.
Nadia, do you have anything to add on?
I wanted to add on the point about education. Now, I think education is really the most important foundation in impacting society, because you can use your education to impact society because as you can translate your knowledge and your skills into making a meaningful impact in someone's life. So I think being well read on current affairs and economic issues and public policy is also another great way. It's a very simple way, but it's a really effective way of gaining genuine interest and feeling empowered to participate in the political and policy landscape in Malaysia. Alongside that, I also think, as Umar mentioned, being curious is very important. To have that curiosity to challenge the status quo and to ask more questions. Because without that genuine interest, your participation in forming or shaping economic policies is going to seem more performative rather than purposeful. And personally speaking, I believe that experience is the most powerful teacher, as you have to try these things out in order for you to learn and grow from them. It's okay to make mistakes, but you have to learn from those mistakes. And I think that is what me and Umar faced when we took on the role as President and Vice President of AYSEF. So there were lots of things that went wrong, but lots of things that we also learned so much about ourselves and about how we work in a professional setting and in an environment where we have to deal with multiple stakeholders and people, and to come up with an event at this large of a scale, right? So personally for me, I found it very rewarding, and I also learned like a lot of new skills and things that I can take with me into the future, such as decision making under pressure and like being adaptable in different situations. And I think last but not least is to stay committed and resilient in what you believe and stand for, because I mean, we all see the news nowadays. The political and policy ecosystem in Malaysia can be discouraging at times.
It can be quite
quite discouraging at times. So it's really important to stay grounded and true to what you believe in, so that you can engage in these issues more critically instead of being cynical.
Welcome back to It's About Youth, where today in the studio I have with me Umar, Khaleed and Nadia Khadijah from AYSEF. Now earlier we were talking about the event and the scale of AYSEF and how one unique aspect I think of AYSEF is how it brings together science, economics, technology and policy all together. It's a space for youths and policymakers to come and discuss current issues. Why do you think interdisciplinary, that has been the keyword here, but why is this interdisciplinary approach crucial for solving today's challenges, and especially in the ASEAN context? Umar?
I think we live in a very fast-changing world, and the content that we used to know can always be learned through AI. Will always be this in that sense. I mean, in terms of content and speed of how we do things, I think AI is still going to win that sense. But having the interdisciplinary approach to things, it provides us the multiple point of views to approach stuff. And I think that's very, very important, because we have to take into consideration that, let's say if I were to be a policymaker, I mean, from an external view, it might be easy, but then when you sit in the actual shoes, you can actually think that, the capital is not enough and things like that. And you would like to, as someone who love ideas and love to actually have these things done, but the practicality itself is actually another view that you have to build. And let's say if you were to have to build projects and stuff like that, I think when you are able to view things from a multiple POV, I think that helps to build the resilience in a sense where Malaysians are not able to think in one direction, but rather they consider the whole aspect of what they're actually going towards. And because right now I think it's because of how we actually also approach AI, if I may touch on that, is because if we approach AI as something that we're scared of, and we feel that it's going to replace us, then it might as well happen actually. But if we take it as something that's going to help us, and we use it as a tool for us to keep reskilling and things like that, to build that sort of thinking, because AI is something that they train through LLMs and stuff like that. But in terms of thinking, humans are still the way to go. So, and having that basically I'm trying to say is that to ensure that we are not replaced by AI, we have to keep our value even higher. What makes humans compared to AI, which is our skill to actually exercise our judgment and use our multiple point of views.
And we're not really going to be replaced by AI in that sense, right? And as you've mentioned also, humans are the ones that's feeding the data to AI. That's kind of an ecosystem. But with AYSEF specifically, these sort of youth leadership spaces, they are so beneficial, and it's a great place for knowledge sharing, but also it can become very quickly a sort of echo chamber for perhaps already privileged voices. Nadia, could you tell us a little bit about how the both of you really personally grapple with that risk, or how do you try to widen that circle to ensure equal access for everyone?
Okay, I'll touch on that later, but I actually wanted to add on something to Umar's point earlier. So Umar is actually doing economics, so I am doing a STEM major, so I'm from a different perspective than him. So from my personal perspective, interdisciplinary learning is really important because, you know, you have the scientists like my people, like me, for example, for example, who are going to be driving innovation and coming out with new solutions for the world in terms of like energy transition and stuff like that. However, those things cannot be deployed effectively without policymakers and economists to regulate, distribute, and implement it effectively for people in our nation and like worldwide. So that's where we work hand in hand, and like everyone works together, because it's not just, you can't just like silo people into their own categories. You know, everyone works together, and that's how change come about, and innovation and development progresses and starts in a country. So that's what I wanted to add on. But to go back to your question on leadership and humility,
avoiding echo chambers.
Avoiding echo chambers. So I think ultimately this is a question about humility and leadership style. Personally, for me, how I remain grounded in my beliefs and stuff like that is to essentially turun padang. So basically get involved in community work and go out there and see for yourself like what is the real economic and social challenges that people are facing right now in the current world. So that's what I tend to usually do. And in fact, in our school, we're having a similar community service event that we're hosting in our school, where we're bringing in organizations and NGOs into our boarding school so that our students can be more well aware about pressing issues going on in Malaysia, instead of being in a safe and secluded environment, which I think we tend to be caught up in most of the time.
And I think from my side is, I think to prevent that sort of echo chambers, I think in general, we like familiarity because it makes us feel secured. And I think the one change, or the one thing that I would like to actually say, is actually we have to start being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Right.
And going out there outside of the comfort zone is very important.
That's where growth happens.
That is where growth happens. Like Nadia and I, we would never have thought that we could actually pull off this event. I mean, I think it's actually one thing I would like to say is to prevent like going into echo chambers and things like that, is actually to always try to keep an open mind. Don't object ideas straight away on things like that. Because right now you're building your thinking. You shouldn't be straight up, have this is your ground and you're sticking to it, because that would consistently change. And don't be afraid of making change or doing crazy ideas, and such as AYSEF, Nadia.
Yep, I agree.
You try and you learn. If you fail, you try again, and you learn from those mistakes, right? When expanding a little bit on Nadia's point about going out, being on the ground, turun padang, For young Malaysians who are watching this today, who may feel so far away from such forums or fellowships and these kind of spaces, what steps or advice would you have for any young person today to take part in shaping Malaysia's future and not just reacting to it, being an active participant in what they want to see? Nadia, shall we start with you?
Sure. I think, first of all, start small, but start intentionally, obviously. There are a wide range of competitions, public policy competitions, youth initiatives, and even forums like AYSEF, for example, for youth to get involved in. So I also think it also starts with having an open mind. So it starts with you. It starts with you taking that risk to step out of your comfort zone, to try something new and explore your interest in whatever it may be, whether it be policy making, STEM, or economics. I think equally important is conversation. So engaging with professionals and peers to test out your ideas is a great way to see if your ideas actually work within real-world constraints, and it also helps you refine them as you speak out loud about your policy ideas and stuff like that. And finally, I think community involvement, as I touched on before, is really important as well, because it keeps you grounded and it keeps your thinking. It makes you think in a way where you're taking the perspectives of people who are living through adversity and tough times, and compared to a person who is not going through that, for example. So I think over time these experiences will accumulate, and you will gain competence and networks. So as this develops, then you'll be enabled to make a change and not just react to policy, but at the same time shape it.
Making that first step, once that step is taken, the only way is upwards, really. Umar, what are your thoughts on this?
I actually agree with you, Faye, on the side that actually most of these opportunities are not really accessible. And I really do understand why Malaysian youth would feel that this is actually far away. Because if you were, speaking from, if let's say AYSEF wasn't done in a way that was free, we would charge, like having the same level of same number of speakers coming from the similar industries, it would be like 2 to at least hundreds for participants, or it would be like invitation only. And that's the reason why we created AYSEF, because Malaysians have that drive, but the access itself is limited. And to those Malaysian youth who feel shy and to feel shy and feel like this is a bit too far away from them, try to start small. It doesn't have to be big, it has to be started. So what I mean by this is, wherever you are, school, workplace, university or pre-university, there's always room for you to start something. And have someone who will back you up or who share the same vision as you and things like that. Number 2 is try to explore as much as you can, because you will always find people who would have the same vision as you, who would have the same drive as you, and who be supportive of you, either it's going to be financially or in terms of inputs or things like that. And another thing is be change makers, not for yourself, but for your surroundings. Because I think we have to admit that we have to start going away from individualism, where you want to succeed on your own terms, but rather how can I, with the means that I have, help the people around me. And I think that's a change that Malaysian youth should have. We shouldn't be focused on how will this let me achieve this for me, but rather how can I make the place that I am right now a better place for everyone.
Right. Going back to that starting small but intentional and having that curiosity. Thank you so much to both of you for sharing your insights today. It's been a pleasure having you in the studio. I've been speaking to Umar Khaleed and Nadia Khadijah from AYSEF 2025, the President and Vice President of AYSEF 2025. This has been It's About Youth with me, Faye Kwan. Thank you for watching and see you next time.